Tropical Storm Nicole is strengthening tonight as it heads west-southwest toward the Florida East Coast, where we have hurricane warnings up. A chilly night ahead and a chilly Wednesday ahead for much of the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states, though at least it's nice and dry. And we've got areas of heavy rain and heavy snow going on out in the west. And that weather system will hook up with Nicole in some fashion and bring rains up the eastern seaboard late in the week. We're going to talk about that and a ton of other things. Where else but tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show? Brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, and southwest Suffolk County on Long Island. And with the adverse weather around, make sure you've got batteries, flashlights, generators working, sump pumps, and of course, if you're still thinking that your yard needs some fixing up, maybe you need some mulch. And remember, winter is coming sooner than you think, perhaps. And that means rock salt. They are Long Island's largest provider of rock salt, and they have the lowest prices anywhere. 631-756-1125 is the telephone number. And as we all know, the website is
OmniTrueValue.com, Joe.
Yes, it is. So, Mr. Rayo, good evening to you. And watching Tropical Storm Nicole, a couple of things going on. First of all, the pressure's taken a rather large drop in the last 6 hours. We're down to 984 millibars. So I'm thinking that maybe is raising some eyebrows at the Hurricane Center. But the structure of the storm on the satellite, it's a little odd. Has what looks like a rather large clear spot in the center, maybe a large eye developing where the diameter is rather wide. But among other things, hurricane warnings are up for the east coast of Florida. It's going to be a very interesting next 48 hours as Nicole heads there. And I'm starting to think, Joe, that everything seems to be kind of moving a little bit more to the left. And perhaps that means that the heaviest rains will be inland of the coast rather than right along the immediate coast.
Yeah, and some forecasters have already mentioned that, and mentioning that coastal locations may not get quite as much as what had been originally been advertised, but nonetheless, whether it be an inch or two or 2 to 4 inches, it's going to come very quickly, and I think it will arrive sometime later Friday, and it may be completely gone by the time we get to the middle part of the day on Saturday. And what I found interesting, Joe, was that you figure, okay, after that's done, we'll clear out and dry out for the rest of the weekend. But it seems that the models, both the European and the GFS, want to swipe us with a little bit more rain on Sunday. What did you think about that?
That seems to be, to me, another shortwave swinging around, and that I think makes maybe is the defining line to colder air that will be coming in. So I guess there is room for a second little wave to develop as that upper trough swings on through. I was looking at that and wondering, if we were maybe a little deeper into the fall or, maybe late November, early December with a setup like this, maybe we would be talking about some snow in some places. I don't think it's going to be cold enough behind the cold front and Nicole going by. But yeah, I can understand why the model's doing that, and I'm going to probably start talking about the possibility that it could be a little bit of rain on Sunday as that colder air starts to arrive.
Yes, and just a reminder to a lot of you out there, no, it's not too early to see snow, even significant snow. You may remember 4 years ago on the 15th of November, and we're coming up to that anniversary, parts of the tri-state area had in excess of a half a foot of the white stuff. And in the year 2012, just a week or so after we went through Superstorm Sandy, we had a storm that started out as rain and then went over to snow, and some areas had 3, 4, 5 inches. So it's not too soon. It's not too early to start considering or pondering the possibility of snow in our area. Not to say that we'll see any on Sunday, but as Joe mentioned, if the cold were a little bit stronger, if we were a little bit deeper into the cold air mass, we just might have to deal with some of that white stuff. But I think it looks like it's going to be just plain old rain, a chilly rain maybe for a time on Sunday.
And the models also still look pretty consistent about the fact that we're going to be in a colder than normal pattern. And one thing I forgot to mention, we were talking about the East Pacific Oscillation, Joe, really taking hold and being impressively strongly negative. And some of the model charts over the last couple of days that I looked at has the EPO at 5 to 6 standard deviations below the mean. That's a really impressive and rarely seen number with this minus EPO. So let me put it this way: if you have an extreme setup like that in the atmosphere, and the negative East Pacific Oscillation favors colder air spreading across the United States and North America. If you can't get an early snow with that kind of setup, I'd wonder what you would really need to do that. And when I say early, I'm talking about over the next couple of weeks, maybe through the end of the month, perhaps something may come together to produce some white stuff. If you had to bet, it would probably be more inland than anything else. But you're sitting here with a fairly extreme reading of an index that says it should get pretty cold for this time of year. So if you got that in your pocket, then you have to see if any other pieces come together.
And we are trending toward temperatures which, and I think even on Saturday we may find ourselves in the aftermath of the storm Nicole, starting off maybe in the 60s, dropping into the 50s later in the day, dropping into the 40s and 30s at night, and then not recovering any higher than the 40s for Sunday and Monday of next week. And all of this coming less than a week after we had 3 consecutive days, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday of this past weekend and the beginning of this week, the temperatures in the low and mid 70s in some areas, even approaching 80. And here we are a week later with temperatures maybe a good 35 or 40 degrees colder than what we were dealing with at the start of this week. Amazing.
Welcome to everybody on the chat board tonight, and welcome those of you who are new to the Joe and Joe Weather Show. We're glad you're here. We're going to start getting into it now with respect to Tropical Storm Nicole. Just want to give everybody a big hello. Brandon Doherty, an early super chat hit, so a big thank you to Brandon for hitting the tip jar. If you like the Joe and Joe Weather Show, hit the like button, because Joe and I love it when we get at least 100 likes. That makes us feel good. And if you really like the show, make sure you hit the subscribe button on my YouTube channel, and you will be notified when the Joe and Joe Weather Show is on, which, by the way, is 5 days a week, Monday through Thursday at 7:35 Eastern Time, Sundays at 11 a.m. And if there's a storm in play, we might be on an odd Friday or an odd Saturday or both, and we will let you know if we're going to do that. So, Nicole. So I'm going to go right to, we'll go to the last Hurricane Center advisory here and get me out of the way. And this is from 7.
Get out of the way, Joe.
That's right. This is 7 p.m. We're at 27.3 north, 74.3 west. Maximum. That position, by the way, I believe was about, what was the 400? I have no memory anymore. 360 miles east of West Palm Beach, Florida, 250 miles northeast of the northwestern Bahamas. And the motion here is to the west-southwest. You don't see that too often in this far north in the Atlantic, but it does happen, and that's thanks to this big high that's up to the north. You can see that the Hurricane Center has hurricane warnings up from along the Florida coast, running from about, I think it's Palm Beach. Let me just make sure. Again, Boca Raton. Boca Raton to the Flagler-Volusia County line in Florida. We also have hurricane warnings up for the Abacos, Berry Islands, Bimini, Grand Bahama and in Grand Bahama Island in the northwest Bahamas. But tropical storm warnings for Andros Island, New Providence, Eleuthera in the northwestern Bahamas. Also, tropical storm warnings from Hallandale Beach to Boca Raton, from Flagler, Volusia County line, Florida, to the Altamaha Sound in Georgia. This also includes Lake Okeechobee, by the way. Tropical storm watches are up for south of Hallandale Beach to north of Ocean Reef in Florida, north of Bonita Beach to the Ocklawaha River in Florida. They have really gone out of their way to pick the hardest pronunciation spots just
Can we
for
quit
me
now?
here. No, I'm going to get through this. And then also extended northward from the Altamaha Sound in Georgia to the South Santee River in South Carolina. Okay? You can always check the advisory. If I missed a few areas, it's quite possible. The track forecast from the Hurricane Center hasn't really changed very much in the first 48 hours. They haven't strengthened to a hurricane and a minimal hurricane tomorrow morning, and making landfall sometime very early Thursday morning. Right on the coast is the forecast at 1 a.m. Thursday. And then by 1 p.m. Thursday, they have it down to a tropical storm sitting over Tampa by 1 a.m. Friday. Now, this is where it's changed in the last few runs. This morning, we were looking at a forecast track that was, by the way, I drew that line last night, and it works. Last night, we were looking at, this morning, they had a forecast track that was just barely offshore, and they've moved it to the west as the models have kind of decided that maybe this thing is going to wind up moving up the west side of the Appalachians. And Joe, the thing is, it's all about the big trough in the west swinging eastward, and that seems to be coming out perhaps a little slower, allowing this to get a little bit further to the west before it makes that sharp turn. And it might only be by a few hours slower, but in a case like this, it can make a big difference in terms of what the weather outcome is going to be, especially for the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast, and also especially for me here in North Georgia, because now if this track verifies and the models verify, I'm going to get into this. The center is going to probably pass relatively close. If that core stays intact, I may finally make up for 3 months of no rain here.
Well, that's how it is sometimes. You end up with a whole heck of nothing, and then all of a sudden one singular storm could bring it all back to you. And unfortunately, that could mean excessive amounts of rainfall and flooding scenario. I hope that does not happen for you, Joe. But yeah, that's pretty. And of course, also gusty winds as well. I don't know whether or not you're concerned about the possibility of any kind of power outage with that. It does not look like that kind of wind for at least for your area.
Well, if we get a little downslope with 20 to 30, if it's gusts in the 20s and 30s, all it had to do is take down one tree over one power line in here, and the whole town is out. That actually happened here last week. We do have a reconnaissance aircraft out there at the moment, and just looking at their plots, the pressure has dropped. They're carrying 984 on the advisory, so on the first pass they got 986. On the second pass, 984. And there's a couple of red wind barbs near the center, which would indicate, at least at flight level, 60 to 64 knots. So it certainly justifies their carrying the winds of sustained to 55 to 60 miles an hour. And if we look at it graphically on the recon plots, Joe, now they do a lot of correcting here when they adjust for sea level and everything else, just to make sure the number's right. So the actual recon observation of the pressure was 980 millibars on the first pass, and it looks like maybe about 982-ish on the second. So I guess when they do whatever corrections they do, they came up with 984 on the advisory. But the wind peaks are only at about, they're just now pushing up towards 60, 65 knots at flight level. And I think one of the reasons why, when you have a pressure down about 984, usually that's low enough that you're talking about a minimal hurricane. This seems to be just below that now. And I think it has to do with the fact, and Joe, you might agree or disagree with me on this, but since this system did not really start as um, a true warm core system, it was maybe some kind of a hybrid, at least for a while, that it takes those systems longer to just sort of warm up for them to create a definable core and for the wind field to tighten up, matching up with the pressure. And I think that's what we're seeing here. That even though we've seen this big pressure drop, we haven't really seen the winds increase yet. That may still play catch up though. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it.
And the fact is also that you said we rarely ever see a storm taking a track to the west-southwest. But again, all a function of that big high pressure cell to the north, just sitting on it, so to speak, or saying, you ain't coming up here yet. And what more can the storm do but say, okay, for the moment, I'll take this unusual route. Still haven't figured out yet, or not figured out. I still haven't had a chance to look to see whether or not they have postponed or they're going to move the moon rocket back into the vehicle assembly building at Cape Canaveral. I mean, after all, now they're under a hurricane warning at the Cape, and you would figure that they would do so. But I haven't heard anything. I'm going to check that in a little bit. But anyway, it looks like a rather active next few days if you're down in the southeastern states, and it'll be our turn with rain and possibly heavy rain up here on Friday.
I've got the floater loop, which I just refreshed, so you can see the lightning strikes that are showing up there in some bands up to the north. You could also, compare it to yesterday, this definitely looks much more tropical than it did yesterday. And there's the circulation's pretty obvious here, and I think you can see that there's just like a hole there in the center. I don't know if that's just the fact that the center hasn't really tightened up yet. There's not a whole lot of convection going on in and around the center at the moment, but that certainly could change. And certainly the plane showing the pressure falling is telling us that something is going on here. And the motion is definitely more west-southwest than it is to the west. And that's important because we're still trying to figure out exactly where landfall is going to be along the southeast Florida coast. The Hurricane Center seems to think that Boca Raton may be that's the southern end of their hurricane warning. And the Volusia Brevard County line is the northern end of the hurricane warning, and that's kind of the zone that they're zeroing in on.
And I just checked here. SpaceX has pushed back the flight of its next Falcon 9 rocket from Tuesday to next Saturday, as Nicole threatens the east coast of Florida. However, and this is interesting, they're keeping the Artemis 1 moon rocket on the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center in preparation for a launch shortly after midnight, Sunday night, early Monday morning. So they are not going to roll that rocket back. They're going to keep it out there. I hope it doesn't fall over. But they're not. I guess they really want to get this launch in for Sunday night late or Monday morning, and they're going to keep it out there, even though, again, hurricane warnings have been posted, and they certainly are going to get, at least I think, in gusts close to hurricane force winds. But okay, so that's what they've determined, and that's what they decided to do, and let's hope nothing happens as a result of that decision.
I'm bringing up the hazards map just to take a look at what's going on. Along the Carolina coast, the Outer Banks, there have been some gusts to 20 to 35 for a good part of the day. Right now, Piney Island is 25 sustained from the northeast, gusting to 40. The buoy that is out offshore at buoy 41025 is north-northeast at 36, gusting to 49. Now, that's the high doing its thing here, pressing down with the gradient. We are also seeing some gusts offshore of North Carolina, southeast of Wilmington, with a gust of 47. Off the South Carolina coast, buoy 41004 is gusting to 45. Along the immediate coast, most of the gusts are somewhere in the 20s at the moment as you go further south, because remember, that's tucked in a little bit further to the west, so we got to wait for Nicole to get a little bit closer. I suspect that we're going to see these winds start to increase as we go through the overnight and into tomorrow along the Florida East Coast right now. And the concern here, Joe, is the fact that we've got this prolonged period of northeast winds. We just had the full moon last night. We've got this prolonged period of northeast winds, and that's going to continue until Nicole gets inland and moves far enough west to start to back the winds around a bit. This is going to be a problem for coastal flooding and for beach erosion over a very, very long stretch of coastline, far north of where Nicole will be making landfall. And by the way, do see a gust here at Melbourne of 37, further south, south of Port at Witham Field Airport, which is south of Port St. Lucie, gusting to 37 there. 20 to 30 downright Boca Raton to Pompano Beach to Miami, and Freeport in the Bahamas is northeast at northeast at 28, gusting to 34. So we're going to see these winds start to continue to increase overnight and certainly during the day on Wednesday and into Wednesday night.
Yep. And as we mentioned again, even though the full moon was this morning, plus we had a total eclipse of the moon this morning, the highest tides, there's usually a lag of about 24 to 48 hours. So depending upon where you are along the Atlantic seaboard, the absolute high tide for this tidal cycle or for this moon cycle will probably not come until either tomorrow morning or maybe as late as Thursday morning. And again, with Nicole, whirling around down over the Florida Peninsula, that's going to cause some rough seas and much higher than normal tides, particularly along the Florida coast and maybe all the way up through the Georgia and the Carolina coastline over these next couple of days.
Radar at the moment in this onshore flow as Nicole approaches, actually producing some showers coming in from the northeast and coming into the immediate coastline. They look to be a little bit on the heavier side further south, mainly south of West Palm Beach down to Fort Lauderdale, Miami, and heading over into the easternmost part of the Keys. And those are all moving southwestward. So you're seeing what's happening here with that big high pushing down and that northeasterly flow, and Nicole kind of getting pushed along from northeast to southwest. And that continues. Again, the longer it stays moving in the southwesterly direction, the further south we'll see a landfall in that hurricane warning zone that we talked about. The track model, the intensity guidance has been pretty consistent. Most of the models, either a strong tropical storm or just bring it to a minimal hurricane between now and tomorrow afternoon. After landfall, a slow weakening, but that actually stays at tropical storm strength going to 72 and 84 hours. Now, at some certain point, this is going to become post-tropical. So we got to figure out where that point is. When do we stop seeing, does the core, I go back to this question I've been asking for a couple of days. I'll ask, again, asking it again to myself from a forecaster standpoint. When is this thing going to maintain an identifiable core? Or is it eventually just going to get absorbed by that cold front coming in from the west once it moves up the Appalachians? Because that's what it looks like it wants to do now, that it's going to wind up moving up the Appalachians. In fact, the track model guidance and the GFS ensembles, along with the other models, the European is actually the furthest left of all of them. You can see the mean track on the GFS in the black, taking it into central Maryland, southeast PA. Looks like maybe somewhere between Lancaster and Harrisburg, across northern New Jersey to northwest Connecticut, and then into southern Maine. This kind of matches up with the Hurricane Center forecast. It sort of looks like that. But then you look at the track model guidance, Joe, the last run of the track model guidance, this is the new 0Z run. All of the, except for one model, all of them are inland, and the cluster is taking the low center somewhere in eastern Pennsylvania. So if that is the case, you're going to have to shift that heavy rain area. Again, you're going to want to shift it a bit further to the west.
And again, that's what we've been saying, that what's one of Craig Allen, our mutual friend in weather, what's he like to say more often than not? The trend is your friend. And the trend so far has been to push He did get
that from me, by the way. Just so.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah,
you should have copyrighted that,
You
Joe.
know darn well that I've been saying the trend is your friend for years.
Okay.
And he does watch.
Well, he likes you.
And he does watch us very. He just listens very closely.
Well, the trend is your friend in the fact that recent model runs have been trying to push everything more to the west. So we'll see if that still works out. We'll see if that's still valid. 48 hours from now, when we're right at the doorway, so to speak, of this system coming in and coming up into the tri-state metropolitan area.
All right. In the meantime, let's look at the new GFS. Northwest Bahamas, track inland, I would say just to the north of West Palm Beach, perhaps. Sometime very early Thursday morning, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., as a minimal hurricane. Then comes out the other side somewhere near Tampa, and actually goes pretty far left, coming inland, maybe west of Panama City on the Panhandle, Pensacola, Panama City, somewhere in there, and then turning northeastward and running the low through central Georgia. So this brings some heavy rains into eastern parts of Alabama, eastern Tennessee, northern Georgia, the low center near Atlanta by 1 o'clock Friday afternoon. The rain band, the rain shield widens considerably with the lead band already at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday, Joe. The low is centered right near or just south of Atlanta. And you've got rain on the GFS, their radar depiction, all the way up into the Catskills, southern New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, back through West Virginia. Heavy rain into central and western PA, southeast Ohio, eastern Kentucky, eastern Tennessee to northeast Georgia. And then the band starts swinging eastward into New England. But the yellow areas stay west. Maybe it gets clipped at the very end Saturday morning when the last rains come through, as the low races up into New England. So I'm thinking, I'm leaning to the idea that rainfall amounts are going to be maybe 2 or more inches west of New York City, and 3 or more inches when you get into Pennsylvania, and less than 2 inches as you go to the east. That would be my sort of off the cuff rainfall forecast out of this.
Well, I've been thinking that Friday we'll see, at least here in the Hudson Valley, well, the folks who are in the Hudson Valley region, and also maybe for much of the tri-state area, anywhere from a trace to maybe a quarter of an inch of rain by the time we get to 1 o'clock Friday afternoon. So I think, as you were also alluding to, Joe, that the precip will be running rapidly or spreading rapidly in from the south and southwest. And then after 1 o'clock on Friday, I think we're a lock, at least from 1 p.m. on Friday to 7 p.m. on Friday, for at least a solid half inch, maybe more. And then overnight on Friday night into early Saturday, anywhere from 1 to 2 inches. And again, the models have been suggesting that the heaviest amounts will be north and west of the tri-state area. However, one thing that I don't know whether or not is worth considering is the possibility maybe of some convection, maybe some rumbles of thunder, maybe a thunderstorm getting involved. And if that be the case, instead of an inch or two, we might find a few places with 2 or 3 inches. And that could, again, lead to some really serious flooding concerns, excuse me, during the overnight hours on Friday night into early on Saturday. But by Saturday afternoon, it should pretty much be all over. And we'll get into, I think, some sunshine and also a noticeable dip in the temperature.
The track I drew, the forecast track, just looking at the precip, and as is typical with these systems, once they get far enough north, the rain shield, particularly when they start to go post-tropical, the rain shield, the heaviest rains shift north and west of the track, and that is indeed what's happening here. You can see where the white and purple areas are. That's all 2, 3, and even some local 4-inch amounts indicated by the GFS. You go east of the track and you're in the blue areas. That's, from the GFS model standpoint, that's about a half an inch to maybe an inch and a quarter, inch and a half tops. We could take the Europeans precip map from the earlier run, because we're now getting the 18Z run of the GFS, the European, which we could take a look at as well. And you see the rainfall here too. The stripe of the purple is more to the west. It's more central PA, north central and western New York, West Virginia, western North Carolina, northern Georgia, in a large area of several inches or more of rainfall. And I think that's probably a good place for me to go to now, which is WPC's forecast. They kind of do it. They're kind of doing the same thing here, Joe. WPC's got 2 to 3 inches or more northwest, small area in northwest New Jersey, but mostly in eastern and central PA, western Virginia, western North Carolina, to just north, just to the east of me. Also, big rainfall amounts of several inches or more, obviously with Nicole coming on shore in Florida, particularly in the eastern half of Florida, with some, one area that's kind of outlined here of about 4 to 6 inches just inland of the coast from where the hurricane warning is up. WPC, I guess, looked at everything from last night and this morning and kind of said, you know what, this is going more to the left, so we better adjust our rain field a little bit more to the left.
And again, that looks like the heaviest rain will come probably, well, I would say the bullseye would be Friday night, although Friday afternoon, those of you who are going to be traveling Friday afternoon. Now, Friday is a holiday. Friday, of course, is Veterans Day, and we hope that many of you will be displaying Old Glory out there for all of the folks who have fought for this country, not just for the most recent wars, but I mean all the wars. Anyway, for that particular day, I think Friday afternoon, the rush hour, Friday afternoon could be problematic with the potential for some steady and possibly heavy showery rains. Then it really comes down Friday night. Again, maybe some lightning and thunder. We'll see about that. That's when the heavy duty stuff comes in, and then very quickly moves on out in the morning. Some clearing by the afternoon, and again, I think it's going to be mild early in the day on Saturday, but we may see temperatures trend toward chillier conditions later in the day. But remember what I was saying yesterday, Joe, about the fact that although the advection, the winds at the surface on Saturday into Sunday are going to be coming straight out of the northwest, the upper level winds are still going to be southwesterly. So we have to wait until those upper level winds come out of a west or west-northwest direction. That may not actually come until sometime on Sunday. So temperatures may fall, but not all that much. 60s, maybe back into the 50s later in the day, Saturday, and then the big drop coming Sunday and Monday with high temperatures both of those days, maybe not even get out of the 40s.
Yeah, that second low is the catalyst to bring in the cold air. I was just very quickly was running through the GFS, and it's pretty clear that second low is what brings down the cold air. In the meantime, we don't want to neglect what's going on out in the west, because that's a very important part of this equation. And then I want to go back to the new 18Z European and take a look at that. But we do have a storm that's inland that came into California this morning, now sitting in central Nevada. and you can see heavy snow being indicated up by the GFS this evening in the Sierra Nevadas. That low gradually translates eastward. You see the cold high in Canada pushing down into Montana, snows in the Rockies, spreading into the Dakotas with some heavy snow in North Dakota and northern Minnesota. All the while, you see Nicole comes in over Florida and makes the turn to the north, and the cold front is coming eastward, and there's your alleyway here as that low runs up what's either what's left of Nicole or the new post-tropical low that it becomes in central Pennsylvania early Saturday morning, and then runs up into New England. And your cold high behind it has to wait for this second low that develops. Most times when that happens, those things never get up here and they wind up going way out to the east. But this time around, it's a little different because the trough axis is still pretty far to the west. And I think that's the reason why we're seeing this, Joe. If you look at the way the thickness lines are lined up, the upper trough is still to the west here early Sunday morning. So that gives this next low a little bit of room and a little bit of energy to work with. So it forms, and that's what brings in the colder air behind it, and also brings a changeover to snow in parts of Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, if this verifies. And then next week starts out cold. We've got some moisture moving across the southern states in the middle part of the week, and then late next week another low comes out, and look at that. It's got some blue snow in Kentucky and West Virginia and Northern Virginia late next week. Of course, we're 10 days out, but you know what, Joe? Again, you got this cold flow. The upper air is certainly screaming that we're going to see mostly below normal temperatures, not just in our neck of the woods, but just about for all over the country out of this. I wouldn't be shocked if we wind up, in 10 days from now that we're talking about some snows for some folks in the east somewhere.
Would not doubt it, Joe. Would not doubt it at all. And it's been a crazy. And we saw from Climate Prediction Center yesterday. Haven't had a chance to look today. Maybe I should, just to see if they're still on track for going for like 90 to 100% of below normal temperatures out just west of here. But at this time of the year, the weather can turn on a dime. And again, as I said earlier, it is not too early. We have certainly seen it in recent years for some sticking snow, significant snow, even here in the immediate tri-state area. So we're talking about, possible up in New England. That I'm not going to argue with that. That certainly is a distinct possibility.
I just brought up the upper air map, and you can kind of see what's happening here. Just follow the gears, folks. The West Coast system coming in, going from west to east. Nicole going from east to west underneath the ridge, which eventually breaks down. Nicole then responds to the deep trough moving through the northern plains and gets ejected quickly in the northeast up the coast, but the upper trough lags, and then you get another arm, actually a rather sharp-looking arm, Sunday morning down from Lake Michigan into Kentucky and Tennessee, and that swings eastward and goes negative, and that's going to bring in the cold air after that second low goes by, and then we just kind of stay on the cold side as more troughing drops into the east over the longer term, and now we're taking ourselves out to about November 19th, November 20th. So it's going to be a very interesting couple of weeks for sure with all of this. By the way, speaking of snow, WPC has, this is the probability for at least 2. And you see the many areas in California and the Sierra Nevadas, up in the northern Rockies, and even down into Utah, into the Wasatch. You're seeing a fairly large area of 2 inches, of at least 2 inches, and also from eastern Montana across North Dakota into northern Minnesota. I'm going to flip to the probability of at least 8. And there we go. And look at that. They got a very high probability of at least 8 for central and eastern North Dakota into northwestern Minnesota. That's an 80% or higher probability for at least 8 being indicated there, Joe. I wouldn't be shocked if we start to see some winter storm warnings, and maybe even some local blizzard warnings might show up there over the next day or two. I'm just going to check the warnings, see what's going on.
The gradient certainly looks like it could tighten up enough for a blizzard warning to be warranted for that area. So yeah.
Yeah, they got winter storm watches up for much of South and North Dakota, northwestern Minnesota. We've got some winter storm warnings up in the northern Rockies, a large area of winter weather advisories, winter storm warnings up and down the Sierra Nevadas, and even in some of the mountains in west of L.A. In those mountains. In Southern California. Also, some winter weather advisories in northern Arizona, a lot of wind advisories, and a few high wind warnings up in the parts of the Southwest. And also in the central Rockies, we're seeing that we've got that going on. And I'm just kind of looking to see if I'm missing anything. Nope, we got that all. And I think what we're going to do is, Joe, do you still let's come back full screen here, and I just want to, there we go. I just wanted to check to see on the chat board what is happening tonight, and I hope everybody is enjoying tonight's show. Joe, do you have, we still have that Briller Jeopardy from the other night. I think we have 5 left to go, correct?
I believe so. We've put that on hold, and I'm not sure if the chairman is very happy about that, but we are very happy now. I think that we do have some time to do that. Let me find that for everybody. La 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 la. Bum, 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 bum. Got Briller, and yes, here we are. Okay, so the category, this Briller Jeopardy category, are these 5 states above or below the national average of 30.21 inches of precipitation each year. And you're right. I think we did do 5, and now we're going to do another 5. So the first one on the list. Let me just do something here, Joe. I just
and everybody on the chat board gets to play along here.
I just had to take something off my my tower. And the first state is Maine. Again, is this state above or below the national average of 30.21 inches of precipitation per year? Above or below?
I am going to say above. And let's see if the folks on the chat board are starting to come in with Steve LaPointe saying above, Craig Carlberg above, John Sachs above, Mark DeCara above, Chuck Cardillo says above, but Johnny Quest says below. Lou Alessi says above, Frank Riccio above, William Uber above. So, Joe, the general, the votes here are well skewed to the above, except for Johnny Quest, and I think there was one other one that said below. So, on that note, what say you for the state of Maine?
Well, I will say it would be funny if Johnny Quest and those who said below were right, but they're not. It is above 42.7 inches. So they're above by 12 inches for the national average of precipitation per year.
Okay.
So the next one. The next state on the list for your edification is Nebraska, the Cornhusker state. Above or below the 30.21 inch average precipitation for the United States?
And for this, I'm going to say below. And
okay, so you got below, and Latex Stream says yeah.
Yes. Well, he still thinks it's Saturday. Anthony says below. Tyler, okay, Tyler's still talking about Maine. Chuck Cardillo below. Christopher Bear says below. Craig Carlberg below. Johnny Sachs below. Johnny Quest below. Brandon Doherty below. Tyler Fienga below. Christina Pedia below. Mike DeCara below. Leon Brabitsky above. Louis Lessie, William Uber, and Frank Riccio are all below. So what say for the state of Nebraska?
Howard Hassel also says above. But Howard Hassel and all of you who said above are wrong, because Nebraska averages below the 30.21 inches of precip a year. Nationally, they get 23.6 inches. They get about 7 inches or so below the norm for the United States. Now, here comes number 3, and it is Washington, not Washington, D.C. We're talking about Washington State. Above or below 30.21 inches of precipitation.
I'm going to say, even though you have a really wet climate in the western part of Washington, and you have a very dry area in the middle part of Washington, and then it picks up again as you go further to the east. I'm going to say above. I think when you average it all out, I'm going to stay for the state of Washington above.
Okay, and
Anthony
says above. Yep, Mike DeChetta above. Brian Carter, hi, Craig Carberg. James Davidson above. Arthur Cotman below. I'm not sure. We did say Washington?
Yes.
Because you have Joe, you put above, and then you have Washington like six names down again.
Oh no, because I'm sorry. No, I guess while I was typing and I hit a bunch of people jumped in ahead of me, and it just posted the way it posted. So yeah, Washington.
All right. All right.
Yeah, Christopher Blair says I'm saying above, but there's so much diversity there. William Uber above. Brandon Doherty says hard one below. Miss Fallerite says above. Lou Alessi above. Howard Hassel below. So what is the correct? And Arthur Cotman says below. James Davidson says above. So what say you, Mr. Rayo?
Well, actually, it's not me. It's the chairman who came up with these questions. But Washington State is above 38.4, again, compared to the normal for the entire 48 contiguous states, 30.21 inches. Washington State above with 38.4 inches of precipitation per year. The next one on the list is Oklahoma. Yeah. Oklahoma, Joe.
Below. I'm going to say below the 30.
Okay. And let's see who else.
Hold on. Let me write it in Oklahoma. And I'm going to say below. So William Uber says below. Craig Carlberg below. Chuck Cardillo below. Brandon Doherty says Delaware gets 45. But we're not there yet. Johnny Sachs below. Johnny Quest, I will say below. Christinapedia below. Leon below. Christopher Bear below. Brandon Doherty below. Frank Riccio below. Steve Lapointe below. Howard Hassel says above. Arthur Cotman says below. So the vast majority of people, folks, are saying below.
Well, a vast majority of people said, Dewey defeats Truman, but they were wrong. And the people who said that it was above, most of them said below, though, right?
Right. Most of the people said below, including myself. So you're telling us that we're wrong.
It was above. So there you go.
I'm a little surprised because they get. I guess they go for many. They get a lot of extremes there in Oklahoma. Either it's the Dust Bowl drought or flooding rain. So I guess when you average it all out, it's like you said, it's above the national average.
36.6. So about 6 inches, about a half a foot over the norm of 30.21. And now for our last state for the night, and that will be the state of Wyoming.
I'm going to say below for Wyoming.
By the way, I like John Sack, 77. It's a trick question, Mona Lisa Vito.
So Christopher Bear says below. James Davidson says good night. Good night, James. Chuck Cardillo below. John Sachs above. Brandon Doherty below. Christina PD says, why? Because we like you.
Like you.
Mousc. Above for Wyoming,
Hey,
says Steve Lapointe. Below, says Craig Carlberg. Tyler Fienga says probably below, so I'll say below. Leon Probitsky above, Anthony below, Mike DeCara above, Howard Hassel above, Christina Pedia above. So the answer is, Mr. Rayo.
the answer is below 15, below by quite a bit, 15.9 inches. Again, the norm is 30.21. So we almost cut that number in half for Wyoming, coming in with 15.9 inches of measurable liquid precipitation during the course of the year. And Scott would also like me to mention that if anybody would like to send a suggestion for a future Briller Jeopardy, send it to him. And his email address is scott.briller@yahoo.com. And scott.briller, I want to make sure there's a dot there. Yes, there is. scott.briller@yahoo.com.
By the way, our resident hurricane statistician, Anthony Orr, who's been coming up with fun facts about this November blast of hurricane and tropical storm activity, says if Nicole makes landfall as a hurricane, Joe, it will be the latest calendar year hurricane to make landfall along the east coast of Florida on record. And the source for that is Philip Klotzbach of Colorado State University. So we thank Philip for digging that fun fact, and we thank Anthony Orr, our resident hurricane statistician, for sharing that fun hurricane fact. And on that note,
the chairman just hit super chats and says, taking care of mom. Thanks for all of the chat participation. More is coming.
Awesome. And thanks everybody for being here tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. We'll be back tomorrow night at tomorrow's a later start, correct?
Correct. I have a talk at 7, which means we'll probably be best to do it at 8:30 tomorrow night.
All right. So tomorrow night's show will be at 8:30 Eastern Time, folks. 8:30 Eastern Time. Okay. So we'll see you then.
There you go.
And we'll keep you up to date on what's going on with Nicole and everything else that's playing out. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night, everybody.
Night.